Hello, my name is Michael Skibris. I've put together a load security awareness course. This course is designed to bring awareness of load security information to transport workers. This program is non-exhaustive and designed to introduce transport workers to best practice and where to find reliable information. All information provided in this program is guidance only and intended to point the participant in the appropriate direction to source correct information. In this case, the load restraint guide will be the primary resource used. Any resources used in the program are strictly used as training aids. All information is sourced from reliable sources, but all truck driver training does not guarantee the information to be correct or current. While care is taken to provide correct and reliable information, the information provided may contain errors and must not be relied upon for legal purposes. Please take a moment to have a look at our copyright notice. So the subjects I want to cover today, it's a very intensive introduction to the load restraint guides, just a little snapshot into how the load restraint guide can be used to support you in your campaign of load security. We start with the regulations, the methods of restraint, and then I want to focus on just one commonly used method, which is a tie-down method, and also want to introduce you to using tie-down loading tables. So after a quick look around, I found some regulations that regulate load securing. Heavy Vehicle National Law Section 111 subsection 1 states a person who drives or permits another person to drive a heavy vehicle on a road must ensure the vehicle and the vehicle's components and load comply with the loading requirements applying to the vehicle unless the person has a reasonable excuse. The New South Wales Road Rule 292 requires a person must not drive or tow a vehicle if the vehicle is carrying a load that A, is not properly secured to the vehicle, or B, is placed on the vehicle in a way that causes the vehicle to be unstable, or C, projects from the vehicle in a way that is likely to injure a person, obstruct the path of other drivers or pedestrians, or damage a vehicle or anything else, for example, the road surface. Heavy Vehicle Mass Dimension and Loading National Regulation Schedule 7 prescribes loading requirements and loading performance standards, and that's the performance standards referred to in the Load Restraint Guide. And I've put a link down the bottom there to the Load Restraint Guide 2018, and I strongly recommend you download that. Rather than type that in, you may type in National Transport Commission or ntc.gov.au and just have a bit of a look around for the Load Restraint Guide 2018. There's a link to a PDF there that you can download. So as a basic introduction to methods of restraint, the methods of restraint listed in the Load Restraint Guide are friction, so that would be part of the tie-down method of restraint. And then the Load Restraint Guide refers to 3 different types of direct restraint. The first one being containing, so tipper bodies and tankers. Blocking, so the use of having the load up against the headboard or the gates. And attaching, so the use of, say for example, twist locks in container work, or direct lashing, often used to secure machines on the back of tabletops. For this course, I want to stick to the tie-down method. I want to start with the friction factor, one of the most significant factors in the tie-down method. So the amount of friction between the load and the deck surfaces and any surfaces in between will affect how much weight each lashing can restrain. The greater the friction, the more weight that can be restrained by each tie-down lashing. So we have a table here that's directly extracted from the Load Restraint Guide, and it provides some examples of different coefficients. So you can see at one end of the spectrum, wet or greasy steel on steel provides a very low friction environment, and the contrast would be smooth steel on the rubber load mat, or better still, maybe a bit of rusty checker plate steel on a rubber load mat would provide a very high friction environment. The next factor I want to talk about would be the lashing angles. Tie-down lashings are most effective if they're vertical and tight. The more a lashing is angled away from the load, the less the clamping force. This is called the angle effect. So you see an example here, the top being a 90-degree angle, and that provides 100% effectiveness. But as we start to have the angle closer to the horizontal, so as we start to decrease the angle, you can see at 45 degrees we've lost 30%, and by the time we get to 15 degrees we've lost 75% of its effectiveness. So the tie-down angle is definitely something to consider. The other factor is the blocking factor. So what we've got to consider is what is blocked. The load restraint guide talks about the 200 mil rule. So you want to position the load as close as practical to the headboard or loading rack. Within 200 mils to the headboard is generally considered blocked. Okay, so now we want to put all the information together. This photo here shows an example of a truck with a steel tabletop and carrying concrete blocks. So we can identify a few factors and work out the effectiveness or the approximate effectiveness of the restraints based on those factors. So the first factor from left to right is the blocking factor. To qualify as blocked, well, the first thing is that we have to assume that in this case, the tabletop headboard is rated accordingly. So for the purpose of this example, we'll assume it's engineered appropriately. To qualify for blocked, it's got to be less than 200 mils between the headboard and the pallets, and then the pallets and the concrete. And we've got no gap between any of that, so that's considered blocked. The next factor is the lashing angle, and here you see a 50-degree approximate angle of the restraint. So it's the tabletop to the restraint. The angle there is approximately 50 degrees. And then the final factor is the fact that we've got a rubber load mat between the concrete block and the steel deck, and that's providing a high friction coefficient between those materials. The other factor to consider is how heavy that concrete block is. It's approximately 1,000 kilos. So now we can apply that information to the load restraint tie-down tables. They're found at the back of the load restraint guide. See page 267, and you'll have about 10 tables that you can use to assist you in working out how effective each restraint is. So I've just picked one that applies to the context we're working with on that photo. Here you have the lashing in question, that's an 8mm chain, transport chain. The tensioner in question is a turnbuckle. The load is blocked. The friction's high, and that's due to that load mat. There's one chain over the concrete block, and in that case it was at least 45 degrees. And all those factors gave us a value of 7,000 kilos. So that is 7 times more effective than the minimum. However, look what happens when we change some of the factors. So we still have 8mm chain turnbuckle. We still have the same lashing angle of 45 degrees, but we've got rid of the load mat, and say for example, I've got rid of those pallets. So I've now got an unblocked context. Same one chain. The value is 640. That's compared to 7,000 kilos. So in that context, if my concrete block weighed 1,000 kilos, I would be undersecured. Huge difference, clearly, by having the high friction environment, the rubber load mat, and the blocking factor. Those two factors combined go a long way to provide security. So that brings us to the end of the video presentation. A few important points to conclude. It's important that you understand that this content in this presentation is non-exhaustive, and it may contain errors. So non-exhaustive meaning there's a lot more to load restraint. A very basic introduction this is, and we encourage you to download a free copy of the Load Restraint Guide 2018. You can do that via access on our website. We've got links to it there. You could just simply do a Google search for it also. I want to remind everyone that serious penalties apply for getting load security wrong, and that the chain of responsibility extends to many parties. And for your licensing needs, all your heavy vehicle training and assessment needs, you can give us a call on 1300 521 289. That's 1300 521 289. So this presentation is going to be followed by a quiz. I strongly recommend you do the quiz. And if you have any further questions, feel free to give us a call, and we're happy to help.